After years of theorizing and planning and hoping to start this long adventure, reality has finally sat in, or come in, if you will. Here, we are finally doing the Supernatural Revisited podcast. We waited so long that Fandom Empire is not even a thing anymore. This is airing on Haddonfield and beyond, and I would not be doing this if it wasn't for the co-host that I'm doing this with, Mr. Tommy B, returning to regular content here on, I almost called it Fandom Empire, but I suppose it's not that. It's Haddonfield and beyond. How you doing, man, as we take this long 15 season journey? We're focusing on 5 for now, of this show that we both love.
I'm doing pretty good, buddy. This is definitely a project that we brainstormed on and off. Gotta do that for years, right? But if I remember correctly, we did take a good swing at it at one point. We did do some episode reviews and episode revisits, but it never became its own standalone project, I don't think. Does that ring any bells for you?
Yeah, that was before we were on YouTube, though. That we were starting to do some of that stuff on, and then on YouTube we were doing some consistent reviews of the Winchesters when they dropped. They actually got some pretty decent hits for us too. And to this day, I still haven't finished the Winchesters, which got canceled, and not because I don't like the show, but because I'm in denial. I haven't even seen Tom Welling pop up in that show, and I'm a Smallville fan, so I will eventually go and give it a watch, and we'll probably discuss that show here on this. Maybe we'll do it for like Patreon content at some point in time. But I think it's more me just being in denial, not wanting the ride to be over. Even though there's a fantastic Supernatural rewatch podcast that's done by Richard Speight and Spate, pardon me. And for the love of God, I'm forgetting the guy that plays Chuck, aka God. Spoiler alert on Supernatural. Forgetting his name. Which, by the way, him and Ruth McConnell, I believe her name is. I should have this. This is a terrible start to a Supernatural podcast. Not knowing the performers' names. Don't worry though. I won't forget Jensen as I decided to name my. Oh, this is terrible. There, youngest son
Ooh,
after him, and
quality.
got the tattoo on and everything. So, um, look, I love this show. I hadn't rewatched this show in years. I had held off a long time on it. I didn't know if we were going to do this project, man. I had a heart attack months ago and almost died. And the very first thing that I decided to watch, we actually stopped after a few episodes in, but we picked back up, was Supernatural. Night one of me being home, we watched the pilot again, and it just felt like the right thing to do. And really happy that we did it. And I'm happy to be here doing this with you. We'll have some other faces popping up on some of these selected episodes too. I know if you watch Haddonfield and Beyond, you'll see Johnny pop up at times, or Jade, or Jason, and Randy. Just depends on the episodes. But the core of the show is going to be Tommy and I going through these episodes. Because this is episode 1, I'm going to spend a little extra time at the beginning here. Uh, I sold Tommy on watching the show. He had never seen it. Can you talk a little bit about that and what made you binge fairly quickly through, I believe at that time it might have been 13 or 14 seasons?
Sure thing, man. So if I remember correctly, I eventually got told by someone, an old staff member of ours, like, yeah, that wasn't that quick. I think I went through the whole series in 2 or 3 months, something like that, which, that's a relatively short amount of time for a show that at that point had been on for, I think, 12 seasons.
Yeah, 200 plus episodes at that point.
Yeah. So if I remember correctly, I think I went through up to season 12, shortly after season 12 finished. That might be it. And I have a hard time believing I'd never seen anything from Supernatural before, but I didn't know what I was seeing if I did. So having the opportunity to dive in fresh after having been on a random stream, you were discussing it with folks on air. I think it was the season 12 finale. that was an interesting experience. It's like, dude, I don't freaking know what we're talking about. Can we get to the good stuff? Can we get to Star Wars or something, like something I actually give a damn about? And I ended up jumping in. You finally talked me into it, and I got hooked relatively quickly. Now, we all have life, right? We got stuff to do. So I couldn't binge season 1 through 12 nonstop. That would be impossible. But it was enough to keep me going for a while. Maybe a short break or two in between to kind of, mix it up with some anime or something. But I went through, and to this day, honestly, Supernatural remains one of the best live action TV series I've ever seen. Absolutely. Well, I'm an anime buff. I'm a cartoon animation buff. Everyone who has listened to me on streams and different content for a long time knows that. But Supernatural's got a special place in my heart for me.
So for me, I started watching Supernatural. Oddly enough, the first episode of Supernatural I ever seen was season 4, episode 1, Cass's debut. And I don't know, I just got hooked, and I had to go back and watch all 3 seasons of content before I watched season 4, episode 2. So I waited a long while before doing it. Um, for me, I know there's one thing in particular that hooked me with the show. If you could only pick one thing that really kept you on this show and becoming a massive fan of it, what would it be?
Dude, that is such a tough question to ask, like off the cuff, because we disagree in this to an extent. That first core 5 seasons or so, it certainly is more cohesive than the remainder of the series. But some of my favorite parts of the series are when they get into a lot more of the well-developed theological, mythological stuff that we don't always get in the earlier series to the same extent. Cass is one of my favorite characters, but we don't see him until season 4. So I guess if I had to go ahead and take a stab in the dark, it would just be the buildup of the story, going from square one with this is the pilot, this is the beginning, all the way to you see Jess at the end of the pilot die, and you continue to see the build up to Azazel, and then you see the rest of him in season 2 for that time period until much later, and that evolves more and more and more. I don't know if that's a cop out answer or if that answers your question, but the build up of the story, it's powerful. As you get down later, it tanks at times. The total story kind of sinks, but they do a good job lifting it back up at times.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think they ever match the season 1 to 5 arc. That's a hard ask. And no, your answer was way more in depth than the answer I'm going to give. And the answer I'm going to give is the dynamic and the chemistry between Jensen and Jared as Sam and Dean. Eric Kripke wrote it to be like Han Solo and Luke Skywalker. Very much feels like that, but brothers. So yeah, no, your answer was way more in depth than my own, so I can't complain. But without further ado, though, let's dive in to episode 1 here a little bit. The plot of it is Lawrence, Kansas, 22 years ago, on November, the date is blocked out for me, but in November of 1983, Dean Winchester, a 4-year-old boy, says goodnight to his baby brother Sam, along with his mom and dad. Mary is lying in bed when she hears Sam crying on the baby monitor. She goes to investigate and sees someone standing over Sam. She assumes it's John. However, she sees the lamp flickering and goes downstairs and realizes John's on the chair. She runs back up to Sam's room. John is woken up by her scream. He runs up to Sam's room, but the baby's alone. Blood splatters from above on his hand. Up on the ceiling is Mary. The ceiling bursted into flames, uh, taking Mary's life, obviously. And John tells Dean to get his brother out. They get out of the house as it goes into flames. We fast forward 22 years and we dive into Sam's in college, university, and dad went on a hunting trip and he hasn't come home yet. And it's just this wonderfully shot pilot. Um, I believe the pilot was shot in Vancouver, Canada. Most of the show was. Um, and the thing I like about the pilot is it's Sam and Dean, not two guys that have been on the road forever, but it's two brothers who are reuniting for the first time in years. And you like it definitely comes across that in the episode. You can never have seen an episode of this show and watch that episode and go, yeah, they're definitely brothers. And yeah, you can tell that there's definitely been some time in between that they've seen one another. Obviously, it's the Woman in White episode. Um, we get the classic spot on the bridge where Dean has to jump off of it when she controls the Impala. She just wants to go home. She had drowned her two kids and taken her own life. And it's just a really well written ghost story that has some good jump scares. There's not, really any gore. It feels like a mini movie a mini horror movie from the mid 2000s, which I think really the first season of Supernatural does a really good job of all the episodes feeling like mini horror movies in, combined or condensed down into, 42 to 44-minute episodes. Um, they get back to Sam's dorm, and or I guess not his dorm, his apartment. And Jessica's on the ceiling, much like Mary, and has her life taken from her. And Dean, once again, harkening back to the beginning of the episode, 22 years prior, saves Sam, gets him out of the house. We get that classic shot. The boys at the trunk of the Impala, fixing up their weapons. We've got work to do. Trunk closes. Roll credits. Um, just a fantastic episode, man. Stars Jeffrey Dean Morgan, by the way. You probably know him from things like The Walking Dead, Grey's Anatomy, and so much more. It's been in movies. Samantha Smith plays Mary Winchester, and this would probably be the only episode where you see two names in front of Jensen and Jared, who are obviously in the show. Directed by David Nutter, the pilot expert who, there's so many shows that look, it's really hard to get a pilot to go to series. You have something like a 5% chance of your pilot being ordered to series. And David Nutter at one point was 12 for 12. And two of the ones that I can think of right off the top of my head are my two favorite shows ever, Smallville and Supernatural. Written by Eric Kripke, the showrunner. It had 5.69 million viewers. Keep in mind, this is before streaming services and downloading was still a thing then. It wasn't nearly as prominent. But 5.69 million viewers for the debut. And it aired September the 13th, 2005. And if you want to feel old, that's just a few months after Star Wars Revenge of the Sith came out in theaters and before it was released on physical media. Your thoughts on all that, man, and the pilot?
So before this gets away from me, I just wanted to make a comment on it because it's something I just discovered. Is that the actress who plays the Woman in White, her name is Sarah Shahi. I might be butchering the last name. She actually went on to have her own career. That Supernatural, that Woman in White was not her first role, but it was a very early supporting role for her. But it looks like she went on to go and have her own career that continues to this day. I think that's pretty cool. Looks like it continues to this day. Oh yeah, it looks like the most recent thing she was in was Black Adam, which, if I remember correctly, tanked, but not her fault. Rewatching the pilot is always just an enjoyable experience to get back into because it's so nostalgic. And I know I've only seen this show since probably 2017 or so. But the atmosphere, the look, the feel of Supernatural kind of sucks you back into time in a way. I haven't seen the entire series, but you just referenced it earlier. A series that does a similar thing for me, and also a CW show, is Smallville. It makes me feel like I'm back in a time where things were a little simpler. I was a little younger, less less responsibilities. It's a pleasant thing, and you really see a much more, we'll say, simplified and yet powerful storyline in this pilot. We got these two brothers. They've had these shared trauma both on screen and off screen, and we continue to see some of the stuff that we don't know yet as the season progresses. And it's just incredibly powerful watching that dynamic be fleshed out more, both because of what they continue to go through on screen, especially in a pilot, and what they've already been through, but they're kind of separated from because Sam, of course, left. He went to university, Stanford, if I remember correctly. So it's really awesome. I was hanging around Reddit the other day, and I happened to see someone put, "How did Sam Winchester get into Stanford? Where did his grades come from?" Good question, right? It's like he was always traveling around.
Yeah,
How could he have any semblance of good grades to get accepted into a school like Stanford? Plot
I think
armor, of
I think
course.
that, yeah, definitely plot armor. One of those things I don't think we're supposed to look at. Um, the look of the show, man. I don't want to like advance on to other episodes. But
Bob already done that.
so like I got kind of like two rewatches going on right now. I got one with my wife where we're on the penultimate episode of season two, which maybe we'll watch tonight. And then I just finished Wendigo, which we're getting ready to record after this. Um, so very committed on the supernatural front right now. But the look of the show in the first two, three seasons is so much darker and grittier and feels more like a horror movie. That doesn't stay that way. They definitely brighten the show up um, to a fault, in my opinion. I think it becomes too bright, and I think cinematography is just so important in this. And some of the camera shots that are chosen are fantastic. In the pilot specifically, they're walking down a street before they meet with the girls that is commonly used in the early seasons of Smallville. They both obviously filmed in Vancouver, but they look radically different because of the filter that Supernatural shooting with the darkness, that dark, gritty. You feel like you're in a horror movie filter, and I really appreciate that. Obviously, the dynamic between Sam and Dean is fantastic, and almost all the episodes, but it was on display in the first episode really well. Both guys really did a fantastic job of making it feel like they hadn't been around one another for a while, but they had a long history. I have a similar, relationship with my own brother, and um, it's really fantastic. Um, I, for me personally, one of the things I really liked about the episode is when Dean gets arrested, right? And he's in there and, you know, they're talking about how much trouble he's going to be in. Sam is the Luke Skywalker of the series, and Dean is Han Solo. And in that scene where the cops are questioning him and they point out his dad's journal, um, Dean never once gives the idea that he's even fearful a bit of the situation he's in. He knows damn well he's getting out of there one way or another. And to play it off that way, to me, just adds such gravitas to the character right out of the gate. I'm not saying it's super believable, but what I am saying is, like, yeah, you get where they were going with the Han Solo. Han Solo is the guy that would look the Empire in the eye and tell him to screw off, and that's what Dean did. Dean tells the one cop, "Yeah, well, what did I do? Plan the murder when I was, a child, a baby, or whatever." Um, it just the way that scene comes off is just incredible, man. I really dig it. I also dig the part at the end of the episode after the kids appear on the staircase. Really freaky shit too. When I was younger, just ghosts in movie really gave me the creeps. But he tells Sam, if you ruin my car, I'm gonna kill you. And just like the dynamic between the two. But sometimes in shows, man, it takes people a while to develop chemistry, and by the time that you develop that chemistry, it's too late. Your show is getting canceled. I'm not saying that's what happened with the Winchesters, but I can tell you where I left off. The cast was much closer knit on screen than they were early on. But Sam and Dean, like, it's there right from the beginning of the show. And as good as Eric Kripke's story is, and as fantastic as David Nutter is, I don't think anyone deserves more credit than the performances put in by Jensen and Jared, and them making it their own.
If I had to think back to this episode, something that kind of sticks with me, it's not quite a favorite scene, but it's a good scene. They're all good scenes, honestly. It's the part where Sam is getting lusted on by that woman in white, and he's like, "I'm gonna take you home," and he starts driving the car into the house. That it's because it was a
Drives
little
it right
goofy.
through.
It was a little goofy, because in one moment, what was she doing? Was she grabbing at his heart or whatever, grabbing
Yeah,
for his chest?
yeah.
Yeah, but then suddenly she stops. He's like, "Oh, I'm up again." Right? Like that was a little goofy. Like you wouldn't be doing that right away. Yeah, that's your plot armor right there. But it was still a good scene. That's just something that I kind of take a step back from. Like, oh, you're up and at it, lively again. Just gonna push that car right through that house. All right, okay.
And then there's the poor guy that gets it at the beginning of the episode from her, where I shouldn't say poor guy because he has his own woman,
Yeah,
and
he had it coming. He had it coming to him.
good looking girl up the side of the road wants a ride, so he gives her the ride. They're kind of in the middle of nowhere, and at that point, he hasn't really done anything wrong, but he's probably not having great intentions. And when she asks him to take her home, he's like, "Oh hell yeah!" uh,
Yeah, he had good
he had
intentions.
it
He
coming.
wanted to give her a ride.
Yeah, no shit. In fairness, the woman in white also had it coming. Never a good reason to allow your kids to get hurt, and in her case, she allowed them to drown. And yeah, not a great outlook there. The one thing I find wild about this, and I just learned this recently, is initially John Winchester, aka Jeffrey Dean Morgan, was only set for this episode. He had no contractual commitment to return beyond this episode. So when he comes back in Home, and then later on in the Mag episode, and then obviously the final three episodes of the season in the beginning of season two, that was not a part of the original deal. He didn't even know he would be back. And when you think about it, he's not given very much to work with in the episode. Like, yeah, it's Jeffrey Dean Morgan, but at the end of the day, could you imagine if he hadn't come back for those other episodes? I think the legend of John Winchester wouldn't have been where it ended up growing to be.
No, it wouldn't have been. But I can also imagine how they could have written him off. They could have written him off as he's dead, or maybe they find something that looks like the remains of him, or something like that. Right? No, they could. It would have been a different route. It really would have been. And I don't want to say the whole story would have been different, some things would absolutely look different than they ended up doing it.
Yeah, no, it's a much different show if John's dead at the beginning there and isn't using Missouri to check up on the boys. But that's an episode for a later date that we'll get to. So a couple of things we're going to do at the end of each one of these episodes, and we're going to be keeping most of our episodes anywhere between 20 and 45 minutes, depending on if we have a third voice on here, depending on how good the episode is. Um, is I want to talk about our favorite scene in the episode. I want to rate the episode out of 10. Sorry, that's my dog walking away. And I want to do, was this a Sam episode or a Dean episode? You have to decide. You can't choose both. You got to give the MVP to one of the bros. And we'll start with this one. What's your favorite scene in the episode? Because for me, as good as the entire episode is, and there's a lot of highs, there's not many lows, which is why it was a mega successful pilot that was picked up. Um, for me, when I look at the episode as a whole, it's the end of the episode, man. It harkens back to the beginning. It lets you know, oh, okay, so that wasn't just a one-off. There's something going on here. Now it's taking Sam's girlfriend on top of the boy's mother and how it plays out. And um, it's just like sort of poetry in motion. The beginning of the episode, we see John sitting on the back of the Impala with the boys as everything went down. The end of the episode, Dean saves Sam, and we get that iconic, we got work to do. The trunk lid closes, and here comes 15 seasons of a show that probably was never meant to have 15 seasons. So for me, it's the end of the episode.
My answer might be a bit of a cop out answer, but mine was the beginning of the episode where you see the whole opening and Mary's death and so on and so forth. So I'll continue on forward, and I will say, do we want to rate it or do a Sam or Dean first?
Well, first of all, that's just wild that one of us had the beginning of the episode and the other one had the ending of the episode. I think that's how effective the beginning in the episode was. Written by Eric Kripke, delivered by David Nutter, aka directed. They just knocked it out of the park, right? And kudos to
Yeah.
all the performers involved in that. That's not just like a Jared and Jensen thing. That's the child performers. That's Jeffrey Dean Morgan. That's Samantha Smith as Mary Winchester. Obviously, Jared and Jensen. It takes everybody to pull that off, and they did a fantastic job with it. Um, Let us know down in the comment section below, though, everyone, what your favorite scene of the pilot of Supernatural is. I'd be really curious to hear some different takes on that, or maybe it'll all be the same. It's the ending or the beginning. We'll have to wait and see. But yes, Sam or Dean, which one of the boys is MVP of the pilot?
Absolutely, Sam. Sam is the MVP of this episode.
What's your reasons?
Well, I feel like this episode's plot really harkens more to Sam than Dean. I mean, you get some Dean moments, but it starts with Sam. And as adults, it starts with Sam. And you really continue to see him, where he is right now in life, where he's headed. And you end up finding, like, hey, this is not meant to be for this guy. He basically gets the kill, you could say. So I definitely think if we had to choose between the two of them, he's the one who gets the MVP.
I absolutely believe it's a Sam centric episode, which I think was really smart for them to do. He's your emotional anchor in the episode. The thing, it happens to both of the boys, obviously losing the mother, but Sam's the one away at college. Sam's the one it starts on. Um, Sam loses Jessica at the end. And with all that said, I'm going with Dean. I thought it was a Dean episode because even though Sam is the centerpiece of the episode, Dean is the Han Solo of it all, where if it doesn't come across the way it does in that episode, I don't know if the pilot gets picked up. A lot of people I notice when doing rewatch podcasts, even members of shows, I think of like Talkville with Tom Welling and Michael Rosenbaum, who played Clark and Lex. Um, a lot of people will harken back to the pilot and be like, that's my favorite because it's the first. And how many times, have you and I covered Halloween projects where people go, Halloween 78 is my favorite because it's the first. The pilot is far from my favorite supernatural episode. It's not even my favorite supernatural season one episode. But Dean in the episode, the way he plays off Sam, the scene with the cops, the scene with Jessica at the beginning where she's, I'm gonna go put more clothes on. And he's like, no, I wouldn't dare or whatever. Just he's the comic relief of the episode, and yet definitely has a serious tone to him. Good mix of both. Again, I'm biased. I named my son Jensen, so don't worry. Not every episode I'm gonna pick Dean. I promise. But yeah, I'm going with Dean in the pilot, man. That brings us to our scores out of 10, though. Before we wrap up here, what do you give it out of 10?
You see, that's tough because we have the whole series as context to go off of.
Yeah,
I
this
think,
is your baseline. You're setting the baseline with this
and if you
episode.
don't use the rest of the series as a comparison, what are you doing with yourself? Then you're just comparing it to nothing. I feel like if this was 2017, I'd be using a different metric here. If it was 2005, I'd be using a different metric here for sure. I'm gonna go 7 out of 10.
You're going 7 out of 10.
And
I
I
went
don't.
with,
I want to clarify and say that's not a bad score.
no,
There's
I mean,
just
there's going to be people that go, oh my God, he only gave it 7 out of 10.
that's
Seven's a
not a bad
solid score.
score.
To me, your 5 is, oh, you just barely passed. 6 was just kind of okay. 7 to me is a good episode. Great is an 8. Amazing's a 9, and obviously a near perfect's a 10. We're also doing single decimal points here on the show, which is why I gave episode 1 a 7.7. So Tommy and I were very close. I wanted to give it an 8, but you've seen my Supernatural season 1 ranking list recently, and I just couldn't give it an 8. So I gave it a 7.7. I'm sure there's going to be episodes later on where I go, oh, maybe I should have had the pilot higher, but we said it now. A 7 from Tommy, a 7.7 from me. Who was your episode MVP? Sam or Dean? Comment down below. And what do you give this episode out of 10? Comment down below. Don't forget to like, comment, subscribe, hit the notification bell to keep up with all the content we have here on Haddonfield and beyond. But that is going to do it for our first episode of Supernatural Revisited. Finally, after many years of planning, episode 1 is in the books. We got work to do.